For who knew what skinny kid with his chops wrapped around a trumpet mouthpiece and a faraway look in his eyes might just become the next Armstrong? Yes, and send you at some big dance a few years hence into an ecstasy of rhythm and memory and brassy affirmation of the goodness of being alive and part of the community.
NJPAC, New Jersey's premier performing arts venue, located in the heart of Newark's Arts District, celebrated the great American writer Ralph Ellison with an amazing evening of classic jazz and spoken word.
We've got Andy Farber and his band. We have Wynton Marsalis. We have Patty Austin, just to name a few. It's just glorious.
This evening is dedicated to excerpts from the writings of Ralph Ellison, mixed with music that was in his record collection.
Lauren Schoenberg is the founding director of the National Jazz Museum of Harlem, which now owns Ellison's vast record collection.
Ralph Ellison was trained as a classical trumpet player when he went to Tuskegee University College in the 1930s. He tried to play classical trumpet and he studied composition, but he grew up in Oklahoma City. And he writes so beautifully about trying to go to sleep at night and hearing the sounds of Walter Page's Blue Devils, coming through the mist into his bedroom and hearing this great stuff.
Jazz in the Key of Ellison was the brainchild of writer, Newark-based entrepreneur, and founder of Audible.com, Don Katz, who studied with Ellison and considers him his most important mentor.
Being a student of Ralph's, you heard references to songs and horn players all the time who he felt punctuated the deep intellectual traditions of the American vernacular and the study of the vernacular. I didn't really understand how deeply and almost academically immersed in the art form he was until I read the essays in Shadow and Act, which include some really sophisticated jazz writing. And I just knew it was something of an obsession. I knew he could blow the horn pretty well. But it was just one of those things that was woven into my understanding of how he viewed American culture in general.
How long have that evening train?
It's wonderful to hear Ralph Ellison's words leading in and out of the music.
Let that boy blow, they say to the ones who were protesting. He's got to talk baby talk on that thing before he can preach on it. Next thing you know, he's liable to be up there with Duke Ellington. Sure, plenty of Oklahoma boys up there with the big bands. Son, let's see you try those Trouble in My Mind blues. Now try and make it sound like old Ida Cox sings it. And I draw in my breath and do Miss Cox great violence. Thus the crimes and aspirations of my youth.
Ellison scholar Robert O'Mealy helped select the excerpts read at the concert.
I would say that if you had to pick 3 books or 4 books of the 20th century that were absolutely indispensable, it could be that 2 of them were by Ellison. His book of essays and his novel Invisible Man are tremendously important. He says, democracy is our word for love. How can we see one another when the problem is that indeed we've been invisible to one another? And because of race and class and gender and other problems, we just have not seen one another properly.
Perhaps I like Louis Armstrong because he's made poetry out of being invisible. Invisibility, let me explain, gives one a slightly different sense of time. You're never quite on the beat. Sometimes you're ahead and sometimes behind. Instead of the swift and imperceptible flowing of time, you are aware of its nodes, those points where time stands still or from which it leaps ahead. And you slip into the breaks and look around. That's what you hear, vaguely, in Louis' music.
Jazz became for him an ideal, representing a democracy at its finest. You have to be yourself in the full robustness of your individuality, but at the same time, you got to hear the people around you.
Love you madly, right or wrong. Sounds like a lyric of a song.
But since it's so, I thought you ought to know. I love you madly.
An Invisible Man, his character in that book actually has a room in his fictional basement, illuminated with hundreds of light bulbs, to which he listens to Louis Armstrong's recording of What Did I Do to Be So Black and Blue?
If there were no other piece that had to be in the concert, that one did. And it did because it's a cornerstone of Invisible Man, the novel. The character listens to it, he imagines himself descending, he says, like Dante, into the music. And when he goes inside the music, he hears a whole history of the Republic sounding there. He hears a slave woman's voice, he hears a preacher's voice. Somebody says, what is freedom? What is it? He's hearing these sounds of American history in the middle of that song. And the question, what did I do? What did I do to be mistreated just because I'm black?
I'm white inside, but that don't help my case. 'Cause I can't hide what is on my face.
This was a guy who had one of the most beautiful voices I'd ever heard. It was his deep Oklahoma voice that was like a coal car coming out of a mine. He had smoked these big old stogies, so it even deepened the voice, but he had this kind of antique elegance and this stunning oracular way of talking, and you could hear it when he talked and you couldn't hear it when you read him.
Imagery which gets into folklore, and it gets into the blues, it gets into folk song, and it gets into poplar songs written by Negroes. So you're doing something quite rich.
As soon as I found out that they had assembled this cast of people who not only loved Ellison's work, but knew him intimately and were disciples of his, like Don Katz, like Professor Robert O'Meally from Columbia, like Wynton Marsalis, we were thrilled to be part of it. Probably one of the greatest tributes to a great American author that was ever done.
The New Jersey State Council on the Arts, encouraging excellence and public engagement in the arts since 1966, is proud to co-produce State of the Arts with Stockton University, New Jersey's distinctive public university.